Imagine a place where all the knowledge of the ancient world was stored under one roof. A treasure trove containing over 700,000 scrolls, where the greatest minds of humanity gathered to unlock the secrets of the universe. This was the Great Library of Alexandria, the most magnificent library ever built in the ancient world. But one day, this beacon of human knowledge vanished, taking with it countless discoveries, inventions, and wisdom that could have changed the course of history. What secrets were lost forever in the flames? Could we have reached the stars centuries earlier? Could we have cured diseases that plagued humanity for millennia? The answers to these questions burned along with the library, leaving us with only fragments and haunting possibilities. Today, we're going to uncover the mysteries of the Great Library of Alexandria. We'll explore what made it the greatest center of learning in the ancient world, what treasures it held, and the tragic story of its destruction. But I must warn you, this story is not just about the past. It's a cautionary tale about what happens when knowledge is destroyed, when wisdom is lost, and when humanity's greatest achievements are reduced to ashes. In a world where information is more accessible than ever, we must remember what was lost in Alexandria. Because the lessons from this ancient catastrophe are more relevant today than you might think. So stay with me until the end, because this journey through time will change the way you think about knowledge, preservation, and the fragility of human civilization. The story of the Great Library of Alexandria begins over 2,300 years ago, in the year 283 BCE, in the city that bore the name of one of history's greatest conquerors. Alexander the Great founded this Egyptian city in 331 BCE, envisioning it as a bridge between Greek and Egyptian civilizations, a melting pot of cultures and ideas. After Alexander's death, his general Ptolemy I took control of Egypt and made Alexandria its capital. Ptolemy had a revolutionary vision: to gather all the knowledge of the known world in one place. He wanted to create an institution that would preserve human wisdom for all future generations and make it accessible to scholars from every corner of the earth. Thus, the Great Library was born, constructed as part of a larger complex called the Mouseion, dedicated to the Muses, the Greek goddesses of arts and sciences. The library's mission was obsessive and ambitious: to acquire every written work in existence. Ptolemy sent agents across the Mediterranean and beyond, purchasing, borrowing, and sometimes even confiscating manuscripts from ships that docked in Alexandria's harbor. There was a famous policy: any ship arriving in Alexandria had to surrender its books for copying. The owners would receive the copies while the originals were kept for the library's collection, marked with the label "From the Ships." At its peak, the library housed an estimated 400,000 to 700,000 scrolls, though some ancient sources claim the number could have been even higher. To put this in perspective, each scroll could contain the equivalent of a modern book chapter, meaning the library held knowledge equivalent to over 100,000 modern books. The subjects covered were vast and diverse: mathematics, astronomy, medicine, philosophy, literature, history, engineering, and more. The library employed hundreds of scholars who worked as librarians, translators, researchers, and scribes. Some of the greatest minds of antiquity studied and worked here. Euclid developed his revolutionary theories of geometry while working in Alexandria, creating the mathematical foundation that students still learn today. Eratosthenes, the chief librarian, calculated the circumference of the Earth with remarkable accuracy, using only shadows and geometry. Archimedes visited the library and was inspired by the works he found there, going on to make groundbreaking discoveries in mathematics, physics, and engineering. The library wasn't just a storage facility; it was the world's first major research institution. It included lecture halls, meeting rooms, laboratories, an astronomical observatory, a botanical garden, and even a zoo with exotic animals brought from distant lands. scholars from across the Mediterranean world competed for positions at the library, which offered free room and board, tax exemptions, and generous salaries. The library's collection included works in Greek, Egyptian, Hebrew, Persian, and many other languages. One of the library's greatest achievements was the translation of the Hebrew Bible into Greek, known as the Septuagint. According to legend, 72 Jewish scholars worked independently and produced identical translations, proving divine inspiration. The library also housed literary treasures, the original manuscripts of Homer's Iliad and Odyssey, the complete works of Greek playwrights like Sophocles and Euripides, many of which exist today only in fragments or are lost entirely. But the library's collection went beyond just books and scrolls. It contained maps that showed the known world, scientific instruments for observation and measurement, and anatomical models for medical study. The library's influence on human civilization cannot be overstated. For nearly 6 centuries, it stood as a symbol of human achievement, a testament to our species' insatiable curiosity and our drive to understand the universe. But as we will soon discover, even the greatest treasures of humanity are not immune to the forces of destruction. Before we continue with the tragic story of the library's destruction, let's pause for a moment. Here's our first quiz question. What happened to the Great Library of Alexandria? Was it destroyed in a single catastrophic event, or did it decline gradually over centuries? Take a moment to think about what you might have heard before. The answer might surprise you, because it's more complex than most people realize. The truth is, the Great Library of Alexandria did not die in a single day. Instead, it suffered from multiple disasters over several centuries, each one stripping away pieces of its magnificent collection. The first major blow came in 48 BCE during Julius Caesar's military campaign in Alexandria. Caesar was supporting Cleopatra in a civil war against her brother Ptolemy XIII. When Ptolemy's forces besieged Caesar in the royal palace quarter of Alexandria, Caesar made a strategic decision that would have devastating consequences. To prevent enemy ships from being used against him, Caesar ordered his troops to set fire to the Egyptian fleet docked in the harbor. The flames spread beyond the ships, reaching the warehouse district near the harbor where thousands of scrolls were stored, either as part of the library's collection or waiting to be cataloged. Ancient historians report that approximately 40,000 scrolls were destroyed in this fire. However, this was not the end of the library. The main library building and the majority of its collection survived Caesar's fire. The library continued to function for centuries after this incident, though diminished. In 270 CE, another disaster struck when Emperor Aurelian fought to recapture Alexandria from Queen Zenobia of Palmyra. During the siege, much of the Bruchion district where the library was located was destroyed. Then, in 391 CE, came perhaps the most deliberate blow. The Roman Emperor Theodosius I issued decrees ordering the destruction of pagan temples throughout the empire. In Alexandria, the Christian patriarch Theophilus led the destruction of the Temple of Serapis, which housed a daughter library associated with the Great Library. Scholars estimate that tens of thousands more scrolls were destroyed in this religiously motivated attack. By the time of the Arab conquest of Egypt in 641 CE, the library was already long gone. The famous story of Caliph Omar ordering the burning of the library is almost certainly a myth invented centuries later. So what really happened to the Great Library of Alexandria? The answer is, it died a slow death over approximately 7 centuries, victim to multiple fires, military conflicts, religious intolerance, and gradual neglect. No single villain can be blamed for its destruction. Instead, it was a combination of warfare, political instability, religious conflict, and the simple decline of institutional support that ultimately led to the loss of this irreplaceable treasure. Now for our second quiz question, which addresses one of the most common misconceptions about the library's destruction. Why did Julius Caesar burn down the Alexandria Library? Before we reveal the answer, let's consider what many people believe. Popular culture and even some historical accounts have portrayed Caesar as deliberately destroying the library, either out of spite, strategic thinking, or simply carelessness. But here's the truth that often gets overlooked. Julius Caesar did not intentionally burn down the Great Library of Alexandria. In fact, he didn't burn down the main library at all. What Caesar did was execute a military tactic in a desperate situation. He was trapped in the royal palace quarter of Alexandria, with his forces outnumbered by Ptolemy XIII's army. The Egyptian fleet in the harbor posed a significant threat, as enemy forces could use these ships to attack Caesar's position from the sea. To eliminate this naval threat, Caesar made the decision to burn the Egyptian ships. This was a standard military tactic of the time, denying naval assets to the enemy. Caesar's troops set fire to the ships docked in the harbor. However, what Caesar hadn't anticipated was how quickly and how far the flames would spread. The fire jumped from the burning ships to the nearby docks, then to the warehouse district along the harbor. It was in these warehouses that thousands of scrolls were stored. Some ancient sources suggest these were books waiting to be cataloged and added to the library's collection. Others claim they were part of the library's collection, stored separately due to lack of space in the main building. Regardless of their exact status, approximately 40,000 scrolls burned in the warehouse fire. But here's the crucial point. The Great Library building itself, located in the Royal Palace complex at some distance from the harbor, was not damaged by Caesar's fire. The main collection of hundreds of thousands of scrolls remained intact. Ancient sources confirm that the library continued to function for centuries after Caesar's campaign. So why did Julius Caesar burn scrolls related to the Alexandria Library? The honest answer is, he didn't intend to burn any library materials at all. He was executing a military necessity, burning enemy ships to protect his trapped forces. The destruction of scrolls in the warehouse district was an unintended consequence, collateral damage in a military operation. It was a tragedy, certainly, but not a deliberate act of cultural destruction. This distinction matters because it helps us understand that the loss of the Great Library was not the result of one villain's evil intent, but rather the accumulation of unfortunate events across centuries. Our third quiz question addresses perhaps the most hopeful aspect of this tragic story. Did any books survive the Library of Alexandria? This is a question that holds tremendous significance, because if nothing survived, then all that knowledge truly was lost forever. The answer brings both relief and continued heartbreak. Yes, some works from the Library of Alexandria did survive, but only a tiny fraction of its immense collection. How did any books survive at all? The answer lies in the ancient practice of copying manuscripts. The Great Library of Alexandria wasn't just a repository, it was also a copying center. Scholars who visited the library would make copies of important works to take back to their home cities. This meant that some texts from Alexandria existed in multiple locations across the ancient world. When the Library of Alexandria declined and its works were destroyed, some of these copies survived in other libraries in Rome, Athens, Constantinople, and beyond. Additionally, during the early stages of decline, some librarians and scholars attempted to rescue texts by moving them to safer locations. Some materials were transferred to the Serapeum, the daughter library in the Temple of Serapis, which survived longer than the main library. Though the Serapeum itself was eventually destroyed in 391 CE, this temporary refuge may have allowed additional copies to be made. So, what specific works survived? We have Euclid's Elements, which was studied at the library and has been continuously copied and preserved for over 2,000 years. Many works of Aristotle survived because they were so widely copied and studied throughout the ancient world. The Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible completed at the library, survived and became the basis for Christian Old Testament texts. Some medical texts by Galen and Hippocrates, which were part of the library's collection, survived through Byzantine and Islamic scholars who preserved and translated them. But here's the heartbreaking reality. Scholars estimate that perhaps only 1% of the library's collection survives in any form today. This means that approximately 99% of the knowledge stored in Alexandria is gone forever. We know tantalizing fragments about what was lost. Ancient writers reference works that were housed in Alexandria but have since vanished. Comprehensive world histories, detailed scientific treatises, complete collections of Greek dramas. For example, we know that the library contained 123 plays by Sophocles, but only 7 survive today. The same is true for other playwrights. Entire bodies of work exist only as titles or brief references in surviving texts. So, did any books survive the Library of Alexandria? Yes, but only a heartbreakingly small fraction of its original treasure. The works that did survive often did so through sheer luck, being in the right place, being copied by the right people, being valued enough to preserve through centuries of turmoil. And we must remember, what survived was likely not the library's most unique or valuable works, but rather the most popular or widely copied ones. The truly groundbreaking, singular works that existed nowhere else were almost certainly lost forever, taking with them knowledge we can never recover. Our final quiz question brings us to the deeper meaning behind this entire story. Why is the Great Library of Alexandria important? Is it just an interesting historical footnote, or does it hold relevance that extends far beyond ancient history? The answer reveals why this story continues to haunt us more than a millennium after the library's final destruction. The Great Library of Alexandria is important for several profound reasons. First, it represents the greatest concentration of human knowledge ever assembled in the ancient world. For nearly 6 centuries, it stood as proof that humans could create institutions dedicated solely to learning, research, and the preservation of wisdom. In an age of constant warfare, political intrigue, and empire building, the library represented something different: the power of ideas over the power of swords. Second, the library's importance lies in what was lost. When we consider that perhaps 700,000 scrolls were housed there at its peak, and that only about 1% of that knowledge survives, we're talking about the loss of hundreds of thousands of unique works. Each of those lost scrolls potentially contained discoveries, insights, and wisdom that could have advanced human civilization. Scholars have speculated about what might have been lost: advanced mathematics that wouldn't be rediscovered for centuries, medical knowledge that could have prevented plague epidemics, engineering innovations that might have jump-started industrial revolution 1,000 years early. We'll never know what humanity lost in Alexandria, and that uncertainty itself is part of the tragedy. Third, the library is important as a cautionary tale. It demonstrates the fragility of knowledge and civilization itself. Despite being the largest and most important library in the ancient world, despite having the support of powerful rulers and dedicated scholars, it could still be destroyed. The library's destruction teaches us that knowledge requires active, continuous protection. It can't be taken for granted, even when it seems secure. Fourth, the library remains important as a symbol. It symbolizes the eternal human drive to gather, organize, and preserve knowledge. Every modern library, every university, every digital archive stands in the shadow of Alexandria's legacy. When we talk about Alexandrian knowledge or scholarship, we evoke the highest ideals of intellectual pursuit. Finally, and perhaps most importantly for us today, the library is important because its lessons remain urgently relevant. In our digital age, we might think knowledge is safer than ever, stored on billions of devices across the world. But the Alexandria Library reminds us that knowledge remains vulnerable. Digital files can be corrupted, deleted, or made inaccessible by obsolete technology. Websites disappear, entire online platforms can vanish overnight, and censorship or deliberate destruction of digital information happens constantly. The Great Library of Alexandria stands as a perpetual reminder that civilization's greatest achievements can be destroyed, and that we must actively work to preserve knowledge for future generations. So why is the Great Library of Alexandria important? It's important because it represents humanity at its best, curious, collaborative, dedicated to learning, and humanity at its most vulnerable, unable to protect its greatest treasures from the forces of destruction. It matters because what was lost there changed the course of human history, delaying progress and leaving gaps in our understanding that persist to this day. And it remains relevant because it teaches us that knowledge preservation is not just an academic concern, it's a civilizational responsibility that requires vigilance, resources, and commitment from every generation. Now that we've explored what the library was and why it matters, let's examine in detail the complex story of how this magnificent institution actually disappeared. The destruction of the Great Library of Alexandria wasn't a singular event, but a slow death across centuries. To truly understand how it became extinct, we must examine the multiple factors and events that contributed to its demise. The first wound, as we've discussed, came in 48 BCE with Caesar's fire. While the main library survived, the loss of 40,000 scrolls was devastating, and the library never fully recovered its former glory. The incident also damaged Alexandria's reputation as a safe haven for knowledge, making some scholars hesitant to send their works there. But the library persisted, continuing its work of collection and scholarship for another 3 centuries. During this period, the Roman Empire's control brought both support and new challenges. Roman emperors like Claudius and Hadrian supported the library, adding new wings and funding acquisitions. However, the 3rd century CE brought a period of crisis to the Roman Empire, and Alexandria did not escape the turmoil. In 270 CE, Emperor Aurelian's forces battled to recapture Alexandria from the breakaway Palmyrene Empire. The fighting devastated the Bruttian quarter, where the library was located. Ancient sources suggest that significant portions of the library complex were destroyed or damaged beyond repair during this siege. By this point, the library that had once housed 700,000 scrolls was a shadow of its former self. Yet it still functioned, and the Serapeum, the daughter library in the Temple of Serapis, continued to serve scholars. Then came what many historians consider the death blow: the rise of religious intolerance in the late Roman Empire. In 380 CE, Emperor Theodosius I declared Christianity the official state religion and began actively suppressing pagan practices. The library and the Serapeum, associated with pagan learning and housed in structures connected to pagan temples, became targets. In 391 CE, Patriarch Theophilus of Alexandria received imperial approval to destroy pagan temples. He led a Christian mob to the Serapeum, which housed the last significant collection of the Great Library. The beautiful temple complex was ransacked and destroyed. Scholars fled or were killed, and the scrolls housed there were burned or scattered. Ancient historian Socrates Scholasticus wrote that the library was emptied of its books during this destruction. While some scholars debate whether the main library building still stood at this time, most agree that this event marked the effective end of the Great Library as a functioning institution. After 391 CE, there are no reliable historical records of the library continuing its scholarly activities. But the story doesn't end there, because even after the library ceased to function, its remaining materials continued to suffer. Whatever scrolls survived, the destruction of 391 CE faced new threats: neglect, natural decay, and the simple fact that no institution remained dedicated to their preservation. Over the following centuries, remaining materials were gradually lost to time, scattered, or destroyed in subsequent conflicts. By the time of the Arab conquest of Egypt in 641 CE, 2.5 centuries after the Serapeum's destruction, the Great Library was long gone. So what truly killed the Great Library of Alexandria? The answer is complex and multifaceted. It was killed by warfare, when Caesar's fire and Aurelian's siege damaged its collections and buildings. It was killed by religious intolerance, when the Serapeum was destroyed and scholars were persecuted for pagan learning. It was killed by political instability, as the declining Roman Empire could no longer provide the support and protection the library needed. It was killed by economic decline, as funding for scholarly pursuits dried up amid broader imperial crisis. And perhaps most sadly, it was killed by changing values, as the classical world's dedication to pagan learning gave way to new priorities that saw the library not as a treasure, but as a threat. The Great Library of Alexandria became extinct not because of one catastrophic event, but because civilization failed to prioritize its preservation. When multiple threats converged — fire, war, intolerance, neglect — there was no system in place to protect it, no backup, no contingency plan. And so, over approximately 7 centuries, from its founding around 283 BCE to its final destruction around 391 CE, the greatest library the ancient world had ever seen slowly faded from existence, taking with it knowledge that might have changed the world. As we reach the end of this journey through time, I want you to consider something profound. The Great Library of Alexandria fell over 1,600 years ago, yet we still mourn its loss. We still wonder what could have been discovered, invented, or understood if those scrolls had survived. But here's the crucial question: are we learning from Alexandria's fate? Today, we live in an era of unprecedented knowledge creation and storage. We have billions of books, trillions of web pages, and more information at our fingertips than the ancients could have imagined. Yet that knowledge remains vulnerable in ways that mirror Alexandria's fate. Digital files can be lost to technical failure, cyber attacks, or simply obsolete technology that makes old data unreadable. Books are still burned, libraries are still destroyed in wars, and censorship still threatens the free flow of information. The lesson of Alexandria is not just about the past, it's a warning for the present and future. We must actively protect and preserve knowledge, not take it for granted. We must support libraries, archives, and institutions dedicated to learning. We must resist intolerance and censorship that seeks to destroy knowledge that challenges or threatens. And we must remember that civilization is fragile, and its greatest achievements can be lost if we don't vigilantly protect them. The Great Library of Alexandria is gone, and we cannot bring it back. But we can honor its memory by ensuring that such a tragedy never happens again. We can learn from the mistakes of the past and build a future where knowledge is cherished, protected, and accessible to all. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the rise and fall of the Great Library of Alexandria. I hope this story has not only educated you about history, but also inspired you to think differently about knowledge, preservation, and our responsibility to future generations. If you found this video valuable, I'd be incredibly grateful if you would subscribe to this channel. We explore extinct things from throughout history: animals, plants, technologies, civilizations, and institutions that once existed but are now gone forever. Each video is carefully researched and designed to not just inform, but to make you think about what these losses mean for humanity. By subscribing, you'll join a community of curious minds who believe that understanding what we've lost helps us appreciate and protect what we still have. Hit that subscribe button, and don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss a new video about history's fascinating extinctions. Leave a comment below telling me which extinct thing you'd like to learn about next. Should we explore extinct animals like the dodo or Tasmanian tiger, ancient technologies like Greek fire or Damascus steel, or perhaps lost civilizations and cultures? Your input helps shape what we create next. So don't be shy. Let me know what fascinates you. Until next time, remember, the past may be gone, but its lessons remain. Keep learning, keep questioning, and keep protecting the knowledge that makes us human. This is Extinct Things, and I'll see you in the next video.